with just a volume pot. Hello, hope all is well. So today we're going to be looking at something that is really nerdy, sort of guitar OCD as I'd like to call it. And that's the effect of the tone pot on a guitar, specifically a more metal orientated guitar. So in this case, my Ibanez RGD. So the factory models, and I think all the models they make from the Ibanez catalog, at least the RGDs, they only have a volume pot on there, and they're a 26.5-inch scale length. They do 7-string versions as well. And this is just one example of a typical, I guess, sort of more metal-orientated guitar, where there is no tone pot or tone knob on the actual guitar. And the thing is, you might be saying, oh, well, I never use the tone knob. I just leave it at 10 and I never touch it. And some people might religiously say, oh, I always take it out of the guitar. But what is it actually doing to the pickups, the sound of the pickups, and how the signal reacts and things like that? So that's something I wanted to look at today. There's going to be various examples. It's quite nuanced, if that makes sense. It can be fairly subtle, but it's enough for me to to stick with having a tone pot or a tone knob in my guitar. So in this example, as you can see, you have like the values of the pots. If you have, for example, a no-load tone pot, that means that it has no effect on the actual circuit, so it's out of the circuit. So it's as if you had a 1 meg volume pot and that's it. Same thing here with a 500K. Typically for humbuckers, we'll be looking at 500K pots, and with single coils, 250K. So you can see here that with just a volume pot, at 1 meg, there's a huge push kind of up here in the sort of upper mids, almost into the treble region. And over here with just the 500K and no tone pot, it's still quite high as well. And once we add a tone pot into there, it's, I know, fairly significantly reduces that resonant peak that's up there, and then makes things a bit more rounded off in terms of sound. So as you can hear in the two examples, the RGD with no tone pot, it's brighter sounding and also louder sounding because of that. And then when you add the tone pot, it's, I guess, maybe warmer sounding. I don't know if you could hear that, or I could use a different term, or darker sounding, definitely. And because of that, it's also perceived to be less loud. And you could see that on the peaks as well on the meter. So the peaks of the RGD with no tone knob were a bit higher than that of the RGD with a tone knob. So you could definitely hear a difference between the two. So for me, I found that the RGD with the tone pot on there sounded more balanced and a bit more pleasing on the ear. And without the tone pot, it was a bit brighter, maybe more aggressive, but also a bit more biting in a specific kind of EQ range that kind of really hits the ear, or the high mids, should we say. And this is what I'm going to show in the next example. So we're going to listen to the same things, but I'm going to specifically target that kind of area to give a better idea of what's going on. So depending on the amp you use, the cab you use, or say for example, what amp model you use, what cab IR you use, what kind of boost you use in front of the amp, all these things may be more or less apparent. But for me, since I'm listening and playing through in-ears, this is something that really started to get to me. And once you hear it, you can't unhear it. And I hope that the examples gave you a better idea of what it's doing. I won't say this is for everyone, but it's something that you can try if you have the option. And also the opposite is something to try, for example. So in my Solar guitar, which is a lot darker sounding, I found that taking out the tone pot or disconnecting it had a really nice effect with the pickups in there and how the guitar sounded. But in the case of my RGD, it was a bit too nasal sounding, and changing the pickups helped to some extent. The real change, or the real big change, in a good sense, was adding the tone pot. And one more cool thing with the tone knob is specifically with recording in mind, because usually live you're not going to be messing around with that. But it gives me more options in terms of rounding off the tone from the source, so from my guitar going into the amp. And so when I'm recording certain parts, I can roll back the tone knob for certain, say, high-pitched or high tremolo pick parts to sort of round that off even more, depending on the sorts of tones that we want to record. Obviously, you can do a lot with mixing these days, and also with digital modeling units, in the sense that you can pull back on certain EQ frequencies, and something that's often done is, say, pulling back on, say, whistle tones. And the thing is, if you're thinking about how you can affect things at the source, I'll put it this way. If I didn't have a tone pot on the guitar, and that's what you heard in the examples. So some of those frequencies are even more pushed because of like resonant peaks and things like that. And there's much more of that going into the amp. And that means that you've got potentially more EQing or more processing to do, if you're into that kind of thing, of course, after the amp. But it's a lot easier if you can affect this at the source. And that's something that I thought of here, and that's something that I did with the RGD. And I'm really glad in my instance or my use case that it really translated well, and it's something that I'll definitely be keeping with this guitar. So I hope that's useful, food for thought. Maybe that's something that you can take on board when looking at your guitar. Maybe you have an RGD and you might have something similar, or maybe you've got another metal-oriented guitar with just a volume knob and a toggle switch, and you've been changing pickups a lot to try and find the right combination. Maybe this is something to try out. Obviously, it mods the guitar. You've got to make some holes and things like that. But for me, in this case, it was really worth it. So if you like this kind of content, please drop a like and subscribe, as it really helps me out. Thanks.